Let's talk about politics and religion on Do Not Talk. This is a nice big 15-ounce coffee mug right there, or whatever you want to put in it. And of course, it's red. This is a great thing for Christmas, and you still have time to order this as Christmas gifts. There's a lot of other things too available to you at charliesimons.com. 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 Get yourself a mug, a hat, a shirt. I got all kinds of fun hats too. And it's just waiting for you. You can contact me. You can also book a guest slot through my website, which is what my new friend William Simpson did. He booked a guest slot, and I said, absolutely, I'd love to have him on. And let's do it. And that's who my guest is today from the Wild Horse Fire Brigade. What the heck? What is that? Well, we'll find out together on Do Not Talk, but I'll give you a little idea of what it is that he does right now. Check it out.
Simpson, I'm the Executive Director of Wild Horse Fire Brigade. We're here with some horses that Julie at the Lazy Horse RV Park helped us trap. And this little mare over here has a real serious leg injury. It looks like blunt force trauma from a car. Probably she was hit by a car. She's nursing about a 4-month-old little baby. So that little foal needs her mommy. So we're going to load her up in this trailer, and we're going to be taking her to a sanctuary that has a vet hospital and a vet on duty. She's had this injury now for about a week, and she's still walking around, and it's pretty amazing that she's able to survive. But it shows why we're saving these wild horses. They have this tremendous ability to heal and come back from things that would kill a domestic horse easily. So we brought our truck and trailer down, and our trailer's falling apart. The wiring harness for the brakes and lights came off, so I got to fix that and do the rescue at the same time. So we'll see what we can do. This is her little guardian stud. He's been watching over her. He's very curious why I'm here and why his mare is in the corral. If that wasn't that serious with the bone showing, we would go ahead and let the flies be on there and do everything, because the maggots actually eat necrotic tissue. Yeah, you boy. This is one of those dangerous stallions on the range that you got to be careful of, because they're so dangerous. So I'm going to start squeezing her down, but it's just a real slow, easy process. So we're getting closer to getting her in. You can't rush this, slow process. Yeah, you got to go in the trailer now.
This is awful, by the way, what he is about to show you. This is what the Bureau of Land Management does when they corral up wild horses. Why do they have to get rid of all the wild horses? Why can't they just let things be how they are? I don't know. You'll have to ask them that. But look at what they do.
Foal trampled.
Oh, my God. Oh, good.
We're getting ready to unload her now. We're at the rescue, and she's here safe with her little baby. Come on, Mommy. Come on. Two little heads looking. Go on, Mommy. It's okay. It's okay, Mommy. It's okay. And we appreciate your support. This is what our donations do. It funds our operations to do these kinds of rescues, and it's not inexpensive.
It's not inexpensive. Did you catch that? That's why he's on the show today. I'm Charlie Simons, your host here on Do Not Talk, talking about two things you're never supposed to talk about, politics and religion. And I'm also talking to people who nobody seems to want to talk about or talk to, especially if it goes up against the Bureau of Land Management, the federal government. Oh, we don't want to point out any kind of, I don't know, especially if it's a Christian organization. They get no help. Until now. I'm glad you're here. William Simpson on Do Not Talk. Let's get him into the mix now. You ready? Hit it. That's quite a video you shot there, my friend. Hello, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thank you, Charlie. I'm the Executive Director of Wild Horse Show and your time.
Hang on a second. I messed up. Hang on a quick second. I screwed everything up. Anybody who watches me live knows that this is a common occurrence. So I'll say what I normally say. I'll fix this in post. Let's try this again. Well, that's quite a video you shot there, my friend. How are you?
I'm well, thank you, Charlie, and thanks for having me
Oh,
on the show here.
oh, thanks for being had. It's my favorite joke. What happened to that mare?
Well, she's at the sanctuary now, and she's healing up with her baby, and they'll be together for forever. They're so a full-term, long-term sanctuary. They got 5,000 acres, and they got a professional team of people there, and so she'll live out the rest of her life with her little baby there, and safely so. She can't be put back on the range. Normally we've done dozens and dozens of these kinds of rescues over the last 11 years, and various injuries and so forth. And you can't put a horse that's been injured that severely back on the range because she's not going to be as athletic as she was before. She'll heal, but she'll probably be the slowest horse, and that means the wolves and the
She'll heal,
lions
yeah,
and the
with a
bears.
lot of scarring, with a lot of damage. That was a pretty bad injury. And if that horse was left in the wild as she was, what would have happened to her, do you think?
Well, she was probably on her way to having a serious infection. Um, when you expose bone, you could see the bone in the tendon in that injury. Uh, that usually is pretty risky. Now, I have seen that heal out here in the wilderness. I had a stud, a 2-year-old stud that was cut to the bone by barbed wire, and he just hung around my cabin because he knew I'd help him, and I gave him feed and mineral block and no antibiotics or anything. I just gave him what he wanted. I didn't want to introduce something that might cause a reaction. You don't know if they're allergic to antibiotics. You just don't know. You're taking a risk. You can't ask
Well, and
them.
that's
Like if you go
usually
to the
the first.
hospital.
That's the very first thing that most vets do, or those who think that they're doing the best thing for a wild animal is give it something that was designed basically for people who aren't prone to that kind of infection. And now you've just overloaded their system, haven't you?
Well, yeah, and then the other thing too is wild horses are a lot different than domestic horses. Veterinarians do their best, but it's based on their clinical experience, right? So their clinical experiences with horses that have been inbred for 6,000 years. Wild horses are a different kind of critter, and so a wild horse has the ability to heal that domestics don't have anymore. And so getting back to that mare. Normally, we would rewild her. We'd let her go back out into the wilderness once she healed, but she's probably going to have a handicap there. She's going to be like a football player or like a quarterback that, had his knee buckled back. And yeah, he healed up, but he's not going to be in the game anymore.
And if they can't eat, if they can't fend for themselves, they wind up being part of the weaker part of the herd, and they're usually lost to predators, which is all part of the natural order of things, isn't it? We see wild horses and we think, oh, how terrible. Oh, well, these poor horses need to be brought in and taken care of. Well, I'm sorry, what? What did they do before you came along? The Lord developed and or designed them, created them for their circumstances that they live in. But we always want to come in and save the day, don't we, by domesticating everything, huh?
Well, we're good at meddling around with everything, that's for sure. And they've been here 2 million years without our help and did quite well. So now that we're here, they're not doing so good.
Yeah, that seems to be. And you mentioned earlier the domesticated horses are very inbred. I have the biggest problem with breeders. I'm a dog guy myself. I mean, I grew up working on ranches and we used to raise Appaloosas, so I know quite a bit about horses. I've done rodeo and so on. But the the breeders ruin a perfectly good animal by trying to get that perfect look. They're always looking for that perfect look. So they breed this one with that one. And even if they're like, related and the inbreeding is a very real problem with dogs. We see it with certain breeds. German Shepherds come to mind, Rottweilers, Doberman Pinschers. They're looking for that perfect look. And what they've done is ruin them. Their heads are too, with the Pinschers, their heads are too small for their brains. They're the swelling on the brain, and they just like snap the German Shepherds with the hips because they want that sloping look. Like, what are you running a concentration camp? What the hell? They want that sloping look, and that now the hip dysplasia. One German Shepherd I had, she showed signs of dysplasia at 10 months, 10 months of age. Her hip joints didn't even grow in all the way. I hate it. I hate what breeders have done to animals.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. So, our effort here is about preserving what we call everybody kind of calls these horses that knows keystone herbivores, and that's like a term. When you unpack there's a lot of stuff there. But essentially, wild horses, because they are so different than the modern inbred horse, the breeds that the settlers brought. The native wild horses were here when Columbus arrived. BLM doesn't like that story because they want to paint them as an invasive pest so they can exterminate them. And that's kind of, I mean, if you look at humankind, when we go to war, even against each other, like in World War II. We painted the German people as these monster people. Well, they're just people like us. It's political leaders that led us into a war. The bottom line is people are people, and that's the way it is. We don't look at we tend to look at horses using our lens, and that's a mistake. You can't
Yeah,
you
that's what I was
can't
talking about.
manage. Yeah,
Right.
you can't manage wildlife, because we don't understand it yet. When you look at evolutionary history, you know, horses evolved in North America. All horses in the world, Charlie, came from North America. They are made in America. That should be stamped on every horse because truly, in every respect, and we know this scientifically, all horses are evolved here 55 million years ago. And then when the
Well,
land bridge, Beringia,
if I may, for a quick second. First of all, I'm a follower of Christ Jesus, and I believe the Bible. I don't think that that anything was created 50 million years ago. It was closer to 6 or 7 thousand years ago. But that's me. I'm just saying. I want to clarify.
hmm,
But I've always learned that the horses were not even native to the American continent, that they were brought over from Spain. That's what I've always learned too. They were not native species here. You're telling me differently.
yeah, well, if you want to really set a BLM guy back on his heels, with like a right cross from Mike Tyson, when they tell you they're not native, you go, oh, it sounds like you know all about horses. And they'll tell you, oh, yeah. All right, well, where are they native of? See, they can't answer that question because they don't know. They don't know where they're native of because they don't know anything about horses. So, and I'm a Christian as well. Okay. So, but, I'm also a scientist. I'm a trained scientist. I went to school. I was a pre-med science major. You studied physics, chemistry, biology, botany, meteorology, genetics. And so when I look at the carbon dating, carbon 14 dating on the fossil records and things, we're seeing this profile in archaeology that shows that they all originated here. Now timelines, the thing about time, the space-time continuum, if you look at Einstein, see God's time is not the way we look at it. We don't understand. God's time, he can compress a lifetime into 1 second. And I mean, into 1 second. And I had that happen to me when I was in a car wreck at 160 miles an hour. A drunk driver coming down the opposite direction on I-5 with the police behind him. He was going over 100 miles an hour, came out of his lane, crossed the median on the Interstate 5, and then hit me head on. It was at 10 at night. So I didn't see him until the last second. And I was going southbound at 80 miles an hour. I was going a little bit fast because I was in a hurry. I had to go a long distance. So I was trying to make time. And all of a sudden in my windshield, I saw two mufflers, four tires, and this pickup truck was coming at me upside down, airborne. Okay. And then boom. And it was really strange because later I found out how vicious the wreck was, but everything went quiet. I was in this little protected bubble suddenly. And it was very strange because and kind of out in the background, I could hear this horrible noise, but I was in this little quiet zone. And in that split second, or however long it was, I was able to see my whole life, everything in detail
Well,
in that split
well,
second.
I've heard
Now,
about that.
time is relative. time is relative. It's very relative. So, you know, so there's a lot of biblical discussion about timelines, but
I'm looking at the
I
chronological age of the written word,
yeah,
the God's word, and I
let me,
don't trust carbon
yeah.
dating any more than I would trust, I don't know anything else man-made. They've done
Well,
testing,
we know,
burying
yeah,
China, a cup and saucer in the dirt. This happened in England. Then they carbon dated, tested it after just a couple of years, and it showed up to be a couple of million years old. I don't trust that carbon dating stuff. That's not what I look at as
yeah, okay.
factual.
Well,
But that's
yeah,
just me.
well, we put men on the moon with science, so it's pretty good stuff.
Allegedly.
When you fly, I'm a commercial pilot. Okay, I've trained in airplanes and turbine helicopters, turbine aircraft, and we fly through the air using science. We don't hit the ground; we stay airborne. So science works. I mean, yeah, it's there's this conflict going on for sure. But I don't. That's not what we're going to hear to talk about today, and that's a long, long, long discussion, well outside the scope of what we're hoping to talk about here. But the point being, the important point, and I'm just going to go with the science that I've studied and that the research shows, okay, which is that they all evolved here until the Beringia connected Alaska to Siberia, and we know that's a fact because when you study the sea bottom there, there's you can see it was terrestrial land at one point. So it wasn't a shallow sea there. At one
And
point,
not
you could
necessarily
walk from
covered in
Alaska.
ice and snow either.
Yeah, at one point you could walk from
Right.
Alaska to Asia, and so
Right.
a million years ago, our horses, E. cabalas, of course, there was originally like 4 or 5 different kinds of little horses, and long, long time ago, and I'm just going to go with the 55 million years because that's what the American Museum of Natural History says, and the
Right.
scientists there. Um, we're looking at there was like 5 different kinds of horses at that point. They're about as big as your dog, and they had 3 toes. They didn't have a single toe. The horse that was successful, that evolved out of that group, was the horse we see today, which is Equus caballus, a single-toed animal. They're a member of the Perissodactyl family. What that means is they're
Well,
related to tapirs. They're related to tapirs and elephants, Charlie. And
yeah.
so and they have that nose. If you watch a horse, they use their nose. They poke it out and they feel with it like a finger. And they use it just like an elephant's trunk almost, but it's really short. So they crossed over about a million years ago because the fossils over there aren't nearly as old as the fossils here. So we know, okay, they got them here. We know they crossed over. And at the same time, about 200,000 years ago, when that land bridge was still there, we got bison came this way. Bison, elk, moose, caribou, deer all came from Asia this way. And then later on, about 50,000 years ago, Asians came across and became North American indigenous peoples. So when you look at the genetics of a Native American and indigenous, like my partner Michelle is part Cherokee, she has an Asian gene. All Native Americans have an Asian gene. And so they came across too. So there was this, it was like a freeway. People were going both directions, people and animals, um, so we look at the timeline, that side of the planet, Eurasia, got horses from us. And then over 6,500 years, people said, hey, we can use these animals to haul stuff. We can pull plows. We can ride them. We can have cavalry. The British knights, the royal stables, and were breeding horses to carry a knight that weighed, 350 pounds with his armor. You can't put that much weight on an 800-pound horse. You're going to kill him. So when you look at native horses, and I'm going to extrapolate on that a little bit more, the horses we have up here average about 800 pounds. So we know from modern equine sciences, Oklahoma, Nebraska, all these Aggie universities, you can only put about 20% of a horse's body weight on his back safely and then ride him around distances. If you load them more than that, you're going to hurt them. You're going to hurt their legs or their back over time, and you can kill them at some point. So cavalry horses, when you got for instance, a Spanish conquistador, who with his saddle and his equipment, his armor, his weaponry, he weighs about 350 pounds. So you can do the math. You can't put that on an 800-pound wild horse. It ain't
No.
gonna work. You're gonna kill them. So the horses the Spaniards brought, and they did bring horses with them, were big horses. They were big guys. They were 1,200, 1,400-pound horses. And then the Aggie horses were even a little bit bigger. The ones that they were using to pull plows and
Draft
covered
horses.
wagons.
Yeah, I love draft horses.
Yeah, yeah, big horses. And so we and I grew up on a ranch with horses, and I was in the Future Farmers of America. I judged animals and did all of that stuff. I had two
Yeah, me
horses.
too.
I had a
Me
Palomino,
too. Yeah.
and I grew up poor. I mean, people think ranchers are all rich. No, I'm sorry. We worked our butts off. We worked from sunrise to after dark every day. I had two pair of jeans, my Sunday jeans and my jeans that I went to school and worked in, one pair of boots, one jacket, a few shirts and some underwear, and I lived in a bunkhouse with my brother, and then the other kids lived in the main house. So it was hard living. But I grew up with a domestic horse. He was my buddy. We worked together. We did everything together in the '60s. And um, bottom line is there are very different animals, and then so we come forward, and of course the BLM will tell you that all horses went extinct during the Ice Age. That's another fabrication. That is a complete lie. We know that there were splinter populations that survived the Ice Age, and that's how God does things. Nature is perfect the way it works because it was designed by people can say, well, it's just happenstance. Well, I see intelligent creative design out here in the wilderness where I live. I see it's like the finest symphony orchestra playing. Everything's perfect. Everything's in tune. Doesn't happen accidentally. This isn't an accident out here. you know so
No,
people
and
want to say
that
it's an
doesn't mean that
accident.
we can't live synergistically with it either, because a lot of people say, well, we humans don't even belong in that environment. Oh, shut up. We can live with that synergistically, and we are to take dominion over the land. But when the government gets involved, it's a whole new idea of what dominion is to them.
Right.
And that is, we're smarter
Well,
than everybody else. We're going to control everything. We're going to make this all work. And what they do is screw it up. And that's what's been happening with these wild horse rescues through the Bureau of Land Management. I've worked with some of those. I've actually dealt with them and been involved with them. And the whole idea of, oh, well, we can't dare leave these horses out here in the wild because, well, there's bears that take them down, there's cougars that take them down. They do the same thing to deer. Are you going to domesticate all the deer as well? How about the elk that get taken down by predators? You got to domesticate all of them too? What the hell is wrong with us? We put horses on a
well,
different level. Oh, they're smarter and they're our buddies, so we got to protect them. Well,
yeah.
they are where the Lord put them. Leave them alone. Let them do their thing. But they don't. They can't. They can't. They're a bunch of Karens. Why can't they just leave these horses alone?
Yeah, well, okay, so it's a simple explanation. People are now worshiping mammon. You know, money is king now. Okay,
There you go. There
nobody.
it is.
It's all about money. It's not even it. Money transcends politics and everything else. It's about economics and money. And if people change their priorities back to what it's really about, and this is what the horses teach us. The horses teach us the importance of family and friendship and love and honor and duty and integrity.
Community,
They have all
a
of they
community.
have all of yeah, they have all those characteristics intact still. And they can teach humans a lot. They've managed to live here on the planet a long time without destroying it. We show up and we start wrecking everything in sight. I mean, we're a wrecking ball. And so, bottom line here is these horses have been here a very long time. They are as native as they can be in North America. And now we're doing new research where archaeologists are finding Native American burial sites. Because there's a lot of development going on, and there's people run into old burial sites, and again they've been looked at and dated. And they can date it all kinds of ways now. We have multiple ways of dating. It's not just carbon-14. We can do depth in the soil. We know how many years of soil are built up. You can, by the inch, you can tell what era it was in. When Krakatoa blew up, carbon and dust went around the whole planet. Well, there's a ring down in the soil, like the rings on a tree. At that level, when that happened. That is a date in the soil because there's that carbon and dust from Krakatoa. Okay,
Right.
so that we know a lot more now than we've ever known. Our science today is getting really good, and like Einstein said, when you get down to the bottom of all the science and the bottom of the barrel, and you get to the very bottom and you look and you got it all figured out, you'll see God looking back at you. That's what he said. And so the bottom line right now is, okay, these horses have always been here. We're finding burial sites that we know are 5,000 years old. Okay, well, hold it. There's a horse buried with an indigenous shaman, his horse. That's a lot of the cultures believe you need your horse to carry you over the bridge to the upper pasture, right? And so bottom line is okay, hold it. If they went extinct during the ice age, how am I finding a horse buried with a guy that's 5,000 years old? How does
How
that
they dig
happen?
that hole?
And that's
How they dig a hole that
and that's
big?
well, they were able to do that. But the bottom line is
No, I'm just saying, if the
we
go ahead.
we're looking at a guy that lived 5,000 years ago with a horse, his horse 5,000 years ago. If they went extinct 15,000 years ago in the ice age, how is that happening? And also that predates Columbus. Okay, and then we've got cultural archaeology. So what do I mean by that? I mean books that were written by explorers. The French, for instance, penetrated deeper into the continental United States than anybody. Nobody got as deep into the central, they came west of the Missouri and just east of the Rockies in the early 1500s and met the Sioux Lakota and the tribe there. And so they put in their journals, these guys are serious guys. They crossed an ocean and came that far inland looking for fur trade routes. These are serious guys. I mean, you don't do that if you don't know what they're navigating and, reconnoitering. And they put in their journal that they met these guys and they were riding horses and hunting buffalo. And interest, here's the thing in the journal, and this is what it says. They said that they met this tribe, the Sioux Lakota, and they were surprised because they called their horses Indian ponies, and that's the terminology they used, Indian ponies. Now, the reason they called them ponies is because where the Frenchmen, these explorers came from, a horse that was 800 pounds was a pony because all their horses were 1,500 pounds. They were big, cavalry farm horses in Europe. They didn't have the little horses like that were ponies for kids pretty much. And so
Right.
that's what they put in the journal. Now, one of those journals was found in a museum in Oklahoma. It's in French. Nobody could read it. So they called Claire Henderson from Laval University in Canada. She's bilingual. She teaches cultural archaeology. And Claire Henderson got it and she read it and she transcribed it for people to read. And she said, what's shocking about this is that it's another piece of evidence that flies in the face of the BLM narrative, that there were no horses until Columbus brought them. So that's not true. So what it is, the fact is, both things happened. There were native horses here, and the Spanish brought horses as well. And the other thing is Sir Francis Drake, who was a serving British knight. He was a military officer for Queen Elizabeth. He was sent on assignment to see if the British could take over the Pacific Northwest, because it was pretty much unspoken for at that point in time. And during the 1500s, everybody was focused on the Caribbean and the East Coast of the United States, right? And the Pacific Northwest was kind of a great unknown. So she sent him around to check that out. We have Drake's Bay down here by San Francisco, of course, and then he was on his way up to Vancouver and Vancouver Island, but he came along the Oregon-California border here, and they came up the Rogue River, according to this journal, and they saw the indigenous living with a Native American horses. They said they were surprised to see that because the Spanish told them they were the only ones with horses. Of course, the thing is when you look at Spanish culture back then, they were really arrogant. They, in that culture back then, only a nobleman could have a horse. A regular citizen in Spain, you're not allowed to have a horse. So only a nobleman could have a horse. So when they came here, they started talking about savages. That's what they called the Native Americans. They called them savages. And they didn't want to talk about their horses because it was disparaging to them as noblemen, because only noblemen could have a horse. So you've got this whole Eurocentric myth that was perpetrated and carried forward. And of course, the BLM is using it because that narrative supports their ridiculous extermination process here. And so Drake, that discovery by Drake is another piece of cultural archaeology that shows that in 1580, when he saw horses way out here on the far western, or the left coast, as some people call it, way out here, here's these horses. Now, let's think about this just logistically as ranchers. Let's say we gave Christopher Columbus an aircraft carrier. We could go back in time with an aircraft carrier. And we go, here, Chris, we're going to give you this aircraft carrier and you come discover America. And oh, by the way, we're going to put 10,000 horses on the deck of the boat. Okay. And you land with 10,000 horses on the land. Could 10,000 horses cross the entire United States, all those mountains, all those rivers, and 50 million indigenous, and get to the West Coast in 88 years? Because look at the timeline here. 1492, when he discovered America, first time he saw it, to Sir Francis Drake in 1580. That's 88 years. Is it possible for any of those horses to make it across, let alone a herd? No, it's just impossible for that to happen. And the other thing that people don't know that Dr. Yvette Collin found in the museums, she went to all the archives in Spain, Portugal, Great Britain. When they would load ships in the 1500s, they would do a side diagram of the decks, and they would depict what was going where, and they did that for weight and balance on the boat. And also, it was a running inventory of what was on board that boat, because all of these rulers, kings back then, King Philip, Queen Elizabeth, they wanted to know what was going on with all their assets. They were, money. And so when they loaded the boats, they put horses on these boats. Those horses were not standing on the deck, because in a heavy sea, they'd go right through the wall of the boat or through.
Well, yeah, of course. They'd have to
so
be
what
below.
They did, no, even below, Charlie, they weren't standing on the deck. They weren't on the floorboards down below. They were hung in slings for the voyage across, just like sailors in their hammocks. And when you hang the horse in a sling.
Excuse me a quick second. I want to get this picture here. The entire voyage, their hooves never touched the floor. They were hanging in these slings the whole time.
That's right.
So they were fed that way. They defecated that way. Everything that they did, which is compressing their rib cage and their inner organs, with their being compressed by their own weight, and your muscles atrophy, because these sailing voyages were months long. So their muscles would atrophy.
It depends. Sometimes you could get across in a month, or sometimes it'd be 90 days, but half the horses that were transported died from cardiopulmonary compression.
Exactly, understandably. Anybody seems to be able to figure that out. Apparently they couldn't. That's crazy. Why would they do that?
The point. Well, because otherwise, if you got a horse standing on the thing and you're in a heavy sea, it'll go right through the side of the boat. A 1,200-pound horse it's like, remember the saying loose cannon? Okay, that's what that's about. You've got a heavy mass, and if you're in a heavy sea and it goes sideways, boom, you hit those planks.
So well, that's when you secure them. If you're heavy seas coming, then you secure them. But to have them hanging like that for a month, 2, 3 months.
That's how they did it. That's how they did it.
That's crazy.
That's how they did it. Yeah. Well, that's how they did it. And it's in all these diagrams. That's how they transported these.
And horses. How many of them would make it normally on average?
The boats, about half. These boats could carry anywhere from 8 to 16 horses, so half would die. So when we start looking at logistics of horse, they were a valuable commodity. When you landed, and let's say you had 16 when you left, and maybe let's say you got 10 when you land. Those are so important for your survival on the new continent.
Yeah.
You're not going to let them. First of all, they're habituated to humans. They're not going to run off. They know you're going to feed them and take care of them. They're going to hang around with you, because they're co-habituated to human care. Domestic horses follow you around like a dog, and so they didn't just run off and breed and breed into millions of horses in 88 years. That's the ludicrous of this whole story the BLM wants to tell everybody. It's the biggest con on the. I mean, I haven't heard of any kind of a con job that's as big as the BLM's con job.
Oh, I guess you
The
didn't
Bureau of
follow the
Land Management.
2020 election.
Yeah. Well, anyway, no, this is worse because here's the thing. Okay, we're gonna dig into this a little bit deeper now. See, why is the BLM exterminating Native American wild horses? That's the
That's what we're
question.
getting
Why
to.
are they?
Yes. Right. And
And the reason,
now what the media does report on it is, oh, they're doing an adoption. They capture them and then they adopt them out to willing families to take these horses in. Well, how many people are there who can do that anymore? There's not many. So what happens to the
yeah.
rest of them? What happens
Well,
to the
so
rest?
here I'm going to give you the whole process from the
Okay.
very beginning here. So what they do is they want them gone, and the reason they want them gone is they know they're native, and they know they're already below 100,000 animals, so that makes them an endangered species, and that is a really big problem when you're managing 245 million acres like the BLM manages, and you want to sell leases for oil, gas, minerals, and livestock permits. So if you have an
And
endangered
burning.
species, if you have an endangered species on that land, the bars and the hoops you got to jump through to do anything make the cost of doing business on the public land prohibitive. And so they want them gone before, because people are saying, look, they're native. We got to list them. We got to list them, and nobody wants to do that. Before they're extinct. We don't want to get down like we did with the bald eagle or the condor. We got 6 condors. What do we do? Well, too late. You've already bottlenecked the genetics. Once you get to a small certain level of population, you can't get back the genetic stuff that you've lost. It doesn't come back. That's lost forever. Okay, that's the thing about genetics. It's gone forever. Once you lose it, it's gone. You can't get it back. So what we're doing right now is, because the BLM manages 245 million acres, the U.S. Forest Service manages 198 million acres. There's 358 million or 354 million acres of privately owned timber forest lands. And there's about 20, 30 million acres of other lands owned by county, states, and so on and so forth. There's a lot of land in America, but the Bureau of Land Management manages 245 million acres. And so if for a long, long time, people have been grazing animals on Bureau of Land Management land. Okay, it's been going on for a long time. The Great Dust Bowls were created by ruminant grazing, cows and sheep grazing in the Midwest, and it created Dust Bowl. Why did it do that? Well, you have to understand physiology of a ruminant.
And how they
Okay, a
eat.
horse is not a ruminant. Okay, ruminants are cow, sheep, goats, deer, elk. Okay, caribou, all those kind of critters are ruminids. Ruminids, okay, first of all, they have a multi-chambered stomach and they chew a cud. They all have that in common. So when you're a ruminid and you don't have any top, front incisors, ruminids don't have any top, front teeth. They have a dental pad. They have bottom teeth. That's it. Horses have upper and lower incisors. They're a different critter. So ruminids, deer, elk, goats, sheep, cows, the way they eat is they put their tongue out. They got a prehensile tongue. They wrap it around what it is they want, and then they pull it in and they use their bottom teeth like a scythe, and they cut it off that way. So there's a little tugging action, okay? And they tend to uproot some plants doing that. The roots get pulled up, okay,
Right.
because you've got a tugging action.
Yeah.
And a horse does this. It's like a lawnmower. So, but the point of this is when a ruminid, cows, sheep, goats, elk, deer, eat seeded plants in the spring and early summer when the grass and the brush put on all the seed, and they eat that, it goes down in their first chamber, and then they ruminate. Then they go lay down and they burp up the cud and they chew it over and over again. That mechanical action crushes all the seeds. So when they poop, nothing comes out in the poop that grows, very little. Okay. Now a horse, if you have a cow and a horse, the exact same body weight, 800-pound cow, 800-pound horse, the horse needs 20% more forage. And the reason is because they're not good digesters. They eat and they poop it out. And I mean, you can see stems and leaves and seeds in a horse poop. And There's been studies on it. Major universities, Oregon State, where I went to school, did a study. It's called the German ability of horse dung. People can go look it up. And they found that about 90% of the seeds that horses eat come out and grow in their poop. So God, in his infinite wisdom, knew that, okay, we got all these other herbivores that are not planting seeds. They're not doing what we need done out there, because somebody's got to be a farmer in the land of wildlife, right? So horses are farmers. They actually grow more than they need for themselves. And so they plant seeds that feed everybody else, the deer, the elk, the rabbits, the squirrels, and even the pollinators. The bees benefit from horse dung because they're seeding flowering plants and grasses. No other animal does that. No other animal does that, because when a horse poops, the seeds are like in a little potted plant. That little dung ball has
Oh yeah,
microbiome in it. It's got the
yeah.
seeds. It's got protection. The seed is protected from the sun and the wind and birds. When birds spread seed, um, the way a bird digests stuff is they swallow pieces of rock and sand. It goes into their gizzard, and their gizzard is a strong muscle. And so when they bring down seed, they use that gizzard and the rock in their gizzard to crush the seed. It's like a mortar and pestle. So it's very ingenious the way birds use. They'll pick up rocks and seeds and sand, and it all goes in their gizzards, and that's how they do it. I butchered a lot of chickens, so when you get to the gizzard, you'll find pebbles and rocks and sand in there with seed. So anyway, the horses do something that no other animal does, but nevertheless, because the economics of grazing on public land are very advantageous for ranchers. So the ranchers that want to graze on public land, they buy a grazing unit, as you know. It's called an AUM. Now, an AUM, what that stands for is one cow, one calf for a month. That's a grazing unit, AUM. And so if you get a contract with the BLM, and let's say I have 500 head of cattle and I want to graze them. So for each cow and calf, and a calf can be up to 500 pounds, by the way. So cow calf, $1.45 a month for a cow calf on BLM land. Now, if I take my cow calf to a private pasture, it's $28 a month. That's the going rate in the real world. But because taxpayers are subsidizing this grazing program, and we are in every respect, by the way, you can't even feed a gerbil for $1.45 a month. I mean, it's pretty terrible. And so here's the other part of this BLM. It's a fiasco. Managing the grazing program with ranchers, the BLM, the Bureau of Land Management, spends $33 million a year managing that program, and they take in $14 million in revenue. How do you like that? Boy, there's a business model for you.
Quite a successful business model. Yeah, exactly.
Typical government business model, right? Well, guess
it is. It's a very typical, yes.
It is taxpayer funded. And that's why they call it welfare ranching. See, it's welfare for these guys. It's welfare. We're subsidizing their businesses. You and me are in the cattle business, by the way. Did you know that? We're in it because we're subsidizing. We should get a payback on that. We should get a dividend.
But there's no money at the end of the year, so we're not getting anything.
No. The BLM doesn't make money, but the cattlemen do. The cattlemen do.
Okay. Oh yeah, they do.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, we're subsidizing their business, so we should get a dividend from the cattle ranchers. That's what I'm saying. Okay. The government lost. They're losing money on their whole management side of it, but the ranchers are making money. That's for sure. So, but they want more of that, and they have a lot of political pull. So they're pressuring politicians. They're saying we need more grazing, and we don't want the rate to go up. They should raise that rate to like $10 per cow calf. That'd still be screaming deal. That'd be a deal of the century at $10. So, but they won't do it because they have so much political power right now that they keep it locked down at $1.45, and they're exterminating the horses because there's no advocacy really for American wild horses. The hunting industry, you got everybody wants to shoot the deer and the elk and all the other critters out there. So if you talk about taking them off that BLM land, oh my God, then you're looking at the whole hunting industry, the guns, the ammo, the outfits, the binoculars. Everybody's going to be on your case, and they have a lot of money and political pull too. So the BLM doesn't dare talk about removing deer and elk, even though they'd like to. Okay. Because the BLM only makes money from the ranchers. They don't collect money from hunters. Okay. So the hunting industry doesn't fund the BLM. So there's kind of a little gear jam there, but the horses have they're a non-commercial herbivore. Okay. They're eating grass and drinking water out there. And the government is forced to keep them there because Richard M. Nixon, a great Republican president, and actually people don't realize how much he did for wildlife. People talk about Watergate. Go look at his record. He did a lot.
I don't talk about Watergate. I talk about China. I talk about the devaluation of our currency. I talk about many other things that he did that do not make me consider him a great president.
Well, yeah, that's a whole different discussion.
Right.
I look at the thing is, in a gold mine, there's a lot of rock that is worthless, and then there's the gold nuggets. So every president is just like a gold mine. Donald Trump is no saint. Biden was no saint. You're not a saint. I'm not a saint. We're all people. And a president is only as good as his advisors. That's it. Donald Trump is an East Coast businessman.
That's why Susan Wild has to go.
Okay, Donald Trump knows a lot about business. He knows about casinos and resorts and golfing. He doesn't know anything about logging. He doesn't know anything about ranching. He doesn't know anything about wildfire. He depends on his advisors, and those guys are all influenced by monetary people with economic agendas. Okay, So Donald Trump can only be as good as his advisors. It's like a football team. You could be the owner of the football team, but you're only as good as your players. That's it. And if you don't have the best team, you lose. And everybody is that way. Every president throughout the history of this United States has been subject to influence by the people around them. And that's a real snake pit. That's a real snake pit. So, and again, I don't want to try to unpack any of that here. But the point about the horses is, okay, they're exterminating them for the wrong reasons. And the other thing is they're taxing us to do the wrong thing, which makes it even worse. And so they run around. And so the first thing they do is the USGS, the United States Geologic Service, flies around with a helicopter, and they do a census on the areas where the horses are at. So in 1971, Richard M. Nixon signed the Free Roaming Wild Horse and Burro Protection Act. Okay, there was 100 million less Americans in 71, by the way. Now we have 100 million more people since 71 living here.
So those are illegal.
When he, okay, another subject, different subject, another 5-hour conversation. Okay, don't want to go there. So, so the thing is this: we got 100 million more people on the boat. It doesn't matter where they come from; they're on the boat. Okay, so at the end of the day, there's more demand on public land than there ever has been, and so there's this big effort to get rid of the horses. So, to make room for more development, more gas, more oil, more mining, more livestock, and so the bottom line with that is we're going to have to do something more intelligent. And so they fly over, and when Nixon assigned the land for the horses to protect them, Nixon gave them 53 million acres. Well, in 71, that wasn't a big deal. Everybody goes, okay, fine. We got 245, just the BLM is 245 million. We built America off their backs. Don't we owe them a little something? Why can't we just let them run around out there? Because we wouldn't be here if it wasn't for the horses. Dogs are not man's best friend. Horses are man's best friend. We built civilization off the backs of horses, including America. So, you can't, and Mr. Trump, President Trump, if I have a message for him, it's Mr. President. You cannot make America great unless American horses are great again, because they were instrumental in this great country. They are part of our absolute heritage and tradition. No horses, no America. It's that simple. So there's no other animal you could say that about. But they're going to make the bison the national mammal. Oh, Well, hold it. That's a latecomer from Asia. You know, they're from China. You know, I mean, there's nothing more American than the wild horse. I mean, they are it, boy. And so they fly around, and now we don't have 53 million acres. Administratively, the BLM has rolled that back to 28 million. So they quietly go to Congress and have these little meetings. You know, we don't really need that. You know, and because they're wiping the horses out, they say, well, you know, now there's not that many, and we can squeeze them down, and we make more money. Oh, okay. You make more money? Okay, well, we'll do that. So now they're down to 28 million acres. And on 28 million acres, they have 7% of the grazing. Right now, according to the BLM's own numbers, right from their website, you can get the numbers right from their website, there's 50 cows for each horse. And the BLM actually has the audacity to say the horses are doing the range damage. There's 50 cows, and that's a cow-calf pair. When they say animal, it could be a cow-calf pair. There's 50 for each horse on the public land. So we know who's doing the damage. It certainly ain't the horses. And the other thing about a cow, besides being a ruminant and stripping off the seed bank, is that they have a bifurcated claw. There's not one cow fossil anywhere in North America. They all came from the New Old World, Africa. They were when they were bringing cattle over here, they were largely the Watusis from Africa, you know, with them big horns. And so the Texas guys say, "Oh, let's call them Texas Longhorns." So they renamed the Watusi Texas Longhorns, right? And but there's not a single cow fossil here, nowhere in America, none, zero, nothing. But there's horse fossils all over the place. They're pretty common when you're doing any kind of archaeological work.
Interesting.
And
Wow.
and the original cowboys, okay, are Africans, because there were no cows in America. The Africans were the original cowboys. They were managing cattle over there in Africa before we did. And, you know, and of course, some of those cows were up in Europe and they had breeds going on and things. But, you know, but when they got over here, you know, then we had cowboys. And you know, when you look at this whole grazing situation and what's going on, now we've got 50 cows for each horse. And they still want to get rid of that one horse to the 50 cow ratio. They want it to be like a 0.25 horse to 50 cows. And they want to squeeze it down to nothing. They actually have published that they want to squeeze them down to 25,000 horses in America, wild horses, 25,000. Think about that. That's a quarter of these. They have an 11-month gestation period. That is so far below the ESA numbers for be listed on the red list. I mean, and then what makes it worse, Charlie, is that they've got them spread out. And when you look at the herd management areas where they keep a herd, there's about 179 of those left. There was originally 350 something, or 379, I think, when Nixon passed the law. Now we're down to about 179, and on 100 herd management areas, there's under 100 horses. So they're inbreeding, and those herd management, they are inbreeding. Why do I say that? Well, let's start out with the BLM's own handbook. Did you know that the BLM has a handbook on managing wild horses? It's called the BLM Wild Horse and Burro Management Handbook. You can find it right online. If you Google BLM Wild Horse and Burro Management Handbook, boom, there it is. Look, you and I paid for it, and every other American. It cost us millions of dollars to publish that handbook so they could go out there and manage our American horses properly. Well, on page 28,
properly.
On page 28, it talks about the importance of maintaining the genetics. This stresses it. And that's because that section was written by Gus Cothran, who's a geneticist at Texas A&M. So the BLM went to him because he's an expert on genetics, and they said, "Hey, Gus, what's the smallest number of horses we could put out there and still pass the red face test genetically?" And okay, you know, give me some money and then I'll figure it out. So he came up and he's the one that did that. They quote him in their book. You got to have a minimum. Here's the floor with certain criteria, by the way. The floor is 150 to 200 adult horses in a herd, not spread out across the United States, in one herd. You need to have a minimum 150 to 200 and you have to maintain a stud book, and you have to do genetic testing every year. BLM doesn't do any of those things. And even when you do all of that, you get 1% genetic erosion every year. And that's what they put in there. Gus covered his CYA, right? Gus put that in there. You still get 1% genetic erosion. And that was an assumption he made, because there's wild horses in North America are the most understudied mammal on the continent.
I don't get it.
Think
I don't
about that.
understand it.
Yeah.
I've been to Yosemite National Forest more than once, and everybody is oohs and ahs over the herd of bison and the herd of elk and the pack of wolves and coyotes and the mountain lions, and if you can spot a moose, a little a group of moose, that's such a big deal. But yet there's not a horse anywhere within the circumference of the Yellowstone National Park. Why aren't there wild horses there?
They're erasing them fast as they can, and
I don't get
all
it.
those animals you just mentioned are well loved by Smith and Wesson and Winchester and all the people that make ammunition, and they love those animals because
Yeah.
they're for hunters those are moving targets, right? So they have a financial support system. They love those animals, and so the horses now they're being mismanaged. They maintain them. They don't even observe their own book, because we have some herd management areas like where I am right here, about 30 miles to the east of me. There's the Pokegama herd management area run by the BLM. Their appropriate management level, according to them, appropriate, what a misnomer that is, 30 to 50 horses. That's their appropriate management level. And their own book says 150 to 200 minimum. See, and so that's the catch right there. They don't even observe their own science, let alone the real science. Their science is pseudoscience, by the way. Now, the real science, the National Academy of Science, or IUCN, is another one where they have look at wildlife populations and how to maintain genetic sustainability.
Wow.
We're looking at, for instance, IUCN says you need a minimum of 500 horses in a herd, 500 minimum, to maintain genetic heterozygosity, or in other words, gene flow, so you don't have genetic erosion. 500 in a herd, not 150, not 200, not 30, not 50, 500. And that's the minimum. And they say, and to make that work, you have to have a stud book and do genetics every year to make that work. So
We
see,
got
here's what
we got to
it's.
wrap this up, William. So I'm gonna throw two thoughts out there and get your feedback on it. Two things that I firmly believe in. One is the government needs to stay out of everything. Why are they even owning all of this? Why is it not just left to be public land? This is our land. This land is your land, from California to the New York Islands, except for the parts that are all owned by the federal and state and even county governments. What the hell? Okay, they make a park. Yellowstone's fantastic. All right, Yosemite is just extraordinary. That's beautiful. Let's end it there. Why does the government own so much land, and why have we allowed it? And what do you think would happen if it all reverted back to public land tomorrow?
Yeah, well, okay, so we didn't talk about the solution yet. There is a solution to this problem, and it's called Wild Horse Fire Brigade. That's the short name for my proven plan. We had a big wildfire up here, 38,000 acre Klamathon fire. Okay, it wasn't a little barn burner. This was a wind blown monster. Okay, well, where our herd, I own and manage with my nonprofit a herd of 200 wild horses. We have one of the largest herds in North America right now. Okay, 200. And they graze out fire breaks up here that protect a big forest full of wildlife. Okay, all them other critters. And when that big fire got to where the horses grazed in these fire breaks and there was areas of low fuel, that's where Cal Fire put it out, right there. Now, okay, that ain't me just saying it. That ain't me just saying it. No, trust me, no. Okay. 2 months before the big fire hit here, the Klamathon fire, Colorado College came down here and did a documentary about my research and interviewed me right in one of those fire breaks 2 months before the fire. And the fire breaks behind me with the horses, this big 5,000 acre area, low fuel. And I'm saying exactly what I says, if a fire comes here, this is where we can stop it. because we got this low fuel situation, and this is how you stop fires, fire breaks, or defensible space. But it can't be 100 feet. It's got to be thousands of acres. You need fire resilient landscapes. Okay, so I'm talking on a documentary, and this is an award-winning movie. It's called Fuel, Fire, and Wild Horses. Fuel, Fire, and Wild Horses. It's won some awards. It's out there online. It's on at horseofnature.com. You can go see that. So then 2 months later, here comes a big fire. Guess what? Everything I said in that documentary came true. Everything. The trees that the horses used for houses, they didn't burn. Fire burned underneath, low and slow, 3-inch flame, didn't burn the tree down. Trees that the horses didn't use became matchsticks. Okay? And so since then, there's another documentary that was done going back and reviewing all this. Oh, by the way, here's what Bill said, and here's what happened. And hey, these horses are valuable fuel managers. So
Yeah.
the solution is simple. The solution is simple. We got 70,000 horses in government holding that you and I spend 150 million a year feeding grass. Government has them in off-range holding. Okay, they're sterilized. They all got sterilized. They got rounded up, branded, sterilized, family separated. You know, just like what the Nazis did in Europe. And so they're in government holding. That's exactly. It's a parallel. I think they just studied that book, and
Right.
and yeah, we'll do that to the horses. So
I've never heard
anyway,
that
so they
connection.
got
Nobody's ever made that connection before. That's quite brilliant, actually.
so anyway when we
It's the
look at
same, isn't it?
this
Same
government,
effect, isn't it? We're going to weed these people out. We're going to weed these animals out. So we're going to slowly erode them down to nothing. And then we'll be able to control
yeah.
and contain.
So there, we spend 150 million a year feeding them
Exterminate.
grass hay and government holding. That's a lot of money, 150 million a year. So we take those horses out of government holding and we put them in the deep wilderness out here in the far west where there is no economic conflict. There's no mining, there's no gas, no oil, no livestock. There's a lot of predators, but the horses need their predators for natural selection. So we stick them there. Guess what? Boom. We just saved 150 million right out of the box, and we're reducing wildfire. And these wildfires, the smoke kills thousands of people every year prematurely. The toxins are different because the fires are so hot. So then the horses that are on the land still running around that they don't want there, right? They're going to round them up. We just move them as families. We keep them together. They have all the trailers and the cowboys to do this. They already do it every day. We just move them, take those off the land that's in conflict. They're going to get it anyway, and put them into the wilderness too, and let them do their job. So now we got 100,000 horses doing fuel management. Each one does 5 tons a year. Okay, that's 500,000 tons. Okay, that were fuel annual grass and brush now managed, and that's I've done the math with a big computer. That saves us $5 billion a year, Charlie. 5 billion a year in savings. And then guess what? The ranchers get 350,000 more AUMs. They can put 350,000 more cows out there. And guess what? We really don't care because this wilderness out here is just as important as that overgrazed land. Okay, probably more because we have deer and elk still. They're not dead. And in the areas where the ranchers are shooting predators with the USDA hunters and themselves are killing predators, that's where chronic wasting disease is rampant in the herds of cervids, which are deer, elk, caribou. When you kill horses, don't get chronic wasting disease. In cows, it's called mad cow or BSE. Okay, they don't get it. Wolves, coyotes, and lions can eat an infected deer. They first of all, when a deer gets chronic wasting, they act kind of drunk the first few days. A predator will get them immediately. Boom. If you're off your
Yeah.
game for 1 second out here, boom, you're gone. Well, guess what? Because the ranchers killed all the wolves and coyotes and lions and all that stuff, now the deer walk around and infect every other deer in the herd. So it's, according to CDC, it's epidemic in 29 states. And when humans eat an infected animal, a deer or a cow, okay, you get it. It's called Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease. It's a prion disease. So it's a misshapen protein. It's not a bacteria. It's not a virus. And when you get it, you die. There's no treatment. You get it, you're dead, period. No treatment. You die. And same thing with the animals. When cows get it, they die. When sheep get it, it's called scabies. They die. When deer get it, it's called chronic wasting disease or CWD. You die. But wolves, coyotes, lions, bears, horses don't get it and they don't transmit it. So if you kill the garbage men, these wolves and bears and lions that they're killing, they get those infected deer quick, so it doesn't spread it to your herd of cattle. Because that's what's going to happen now. Because I talked to Dr. Isabel at the Prion Research Center, and he said, Bill, these infected deer in these states are grazing right next to the cows and the sheep. They're going to get it. And then you're going to have an epidemic of mad cow again. What happens to the cattle industry then? Because these knuckleheads, they don't want to learn science. I'm trying to educate some of these ranchers. They don't want to learn science. They're too focused. I need $1. I need to make money. I need money today. Well, you're not going to have money tomorrow because of your being penny wise and pound foolish. The future is critical. And so we got to be careful about, taking out all these predators the way we are, because their nature's garbage men. And very important point,
and they keep the genetic pool deep.
Yep, that's right. On cattle, see, you don't want natural selection. You want all your calves and lambs to live. I used to ride around with my lever action Winchester on my horse and shoot predators, because if they ate my calves and my lambs at the ranch growing up, we didn't make the mortgage payment. We were poor. We needed every and our ewes had twins, so if anything ate one of those babies or both those babies, that was a lot of money we weren't going to have. And so I get it. I get it. You need production, but the thing is you got to be careful about what you're doing. If you do it wrong, the outcome, just like wildfire. Why do we have these big wildfires, Charlie? It's because California is missing 2 million deer. We've overhunted the state. We're down to 380,000 deer. We used to have 3 million. Okay. The missing deer were eating 5 million tons of grass and brush every year in California. Just California, 5 million tons. That's a lot of grass and brush. And it's all on fire. And it burns abnormally hot because there's so much fuel. That is why we have fires, is because we've lost our herbivory. And there's a lot of science that says that. William J. Ripple, The Collapse of the Large Herbivores, talks about that on 5 continents. And Australia, they never had catastrophic fire in Australia till they killed 5 million kangaroos. That was their large herbivore there. Now, on the continent, you can dig down the soil. There's no carbon layer from big catastrophic fires ever. Until, boom, recently the whole damn continent's on fire now because they killed all their herbivores. And that's what Ripple says in his study. He's a professor of forestry at Oregon State, where I went to school. So the bottom line is we need to look at what we're doing very carefully, and we got to stop thinking about money only. It can't be money first and everything second. Because if we keep that model going, first of all, we're gonna all end up dead, because 80,000 people on the West Coast die from wildfire smoke. That's according to UCLA's 11-year study. Okay, we extrapolated it from just in California alone, it's 5,000 moms, dads, grandpa's kids dead prematurely from these new toxins, because the smoke it's new pyrochemistry. The fire is hotter. We're getting new compounds formed, and they're deadly. So UCLA says 5,000 people die prematurely every year, and that costs California $435 billion in economic damage. $435 billion in economic damage. And so I gave the California UCLA study to a supercomputer, and I said, please extrapolate this to the West Coast. It says 80,000 people die prematurely in body bags. 80,000 people dead prematurely from wildfire smoke. And the economic damage, $1.5 trillion. We got to get our heads around this fast, Charlie, because the way it's going right now, if this keeps up, our country's going to go bankrupt. This is the largest existential threat we've ever faced. It is a national security priority right now.
No, these wildfires that's climate change, William. It's climate change. That's the biggest.
Well, okay. Let me straighten that out for your audience. Let me straighten that out for your audience.
Okay, we'll have to make it quick.
Basically, climate change has an effect on the grass and brush that's ungrazed. That's what it does. It's not, you can't have fire. I don't see the Sahara Desert spontaneously combusting. We could raise the atmospheric temperature 5 degrees, nothing's going to happen. What's happening is the longer and drier summers, because the herbivory is gone, you got all this grass and brush piled up every year. It gets dry sooner, it stays dry longer, and that opens up a window for more fire.
Changes. the climate changes. The argument is it
Of course it
man-made?
does.
But it sounds to me like this problem with the fires and the burning hotter and the underbrush all falls on the basically on the shoulders of the government controlling land, which goes back to my question that we haven't answered, but I'll have to have you on again. I'd love to know what you would think about what if tomorrow the government didn't own anything and it all became public land? What do you think would happen? So,
Yeah, that,
William Simpson, how do we find you? How do we follow what you're doing? How do we help? How do we help? Especially if you got 200
well, we're
head or a herd of 200, you do need some help.
well, our herd is on the open range, and they're allowed to graze openly and freely, legally. You know, where they're actually designated as livestock, because if you bought a bunch of horses off the BLM, they're BLM wild horses, right? They got the brand on the neck. Once you buy
Oh, yeah.
them and you put them on your land, they're livestock. Jurisdictionally, now they're livestock. So, because we own our herd here, they're livestock. Okay, and they're on open range, so they're grazing 30,000 acres. So, controlling the fire field, protecting this community. And it doesn't cost us a penny, it's free. We're an all volunteer nonprofit, we're a 501c3. People support us. It's a tax write off, of course. But what we do is we teach wild horse ecology for Cal State. So we have students come up here for a 2-week fellowship in the wilderness, and we teach them about fuel management, mitigation, and how the horses are so valuable in doing that. Okay. And because the horse does 5 tons, the deer only does about 1.2 tons a year. So a horse is better at it, and they reseed. Deer don't reseed, so that
And there's
controls
that.
erosion.
Exactly. That's so beneficial.
Yeah,
We
yeah,
we
it helps your
cannot stress
fisheries.
that enough. There's a reason why in the early days before there was this chemicalized fertilizer crap, you used animal dung to fertilize your field, fertilize your crops, and you didn't use horse dung because of that very reason. You'd have all the other kinds of things sprouting up wherever you used it. So you use
That's right.
cattle,
Yeah.
you use
So
sheep,
so
yeah.
people can learn about what we're doing at horseofnature.com. That's our award-winning
There
documentary
it
that's
is.
out there.
Horse
Horse
H
of
O H
Nature.
O R S E of nature. Horseofnature.com.
Com. Yeah, there's
Good.
and the insurance industry did a video about us. The insurance industry analysts looked at our model and they go, "Wow, we need to do this. This is great." So there are videos there. Fuel Fire and Wild Horses is there, and a trailer to our new documentary Horse of Nature is at horseofnature.com. And then our organization is just simply Wild Horse Fire Brigade, 4 words, Wild Horse Fire Brigade. You just Google that, we come right up to the top, easy to find. And you're going to see a whole bunch of articles, The Guardian, NPR, The Atlantic, and CBS, ABC, NBC. Everybody's done stories because everybody looks at this model and they go, "Hey, this saves taxpayers billions of dollars. We need to go do." And it saves the wild horses. They get to be wild and free, like
Imagine that.
the law. Imagine that. So so that's what we're trying to do now. We're run this thing on air right now. Because I was smart because when I retired, I paid off my land. And so I own what I own. I can survive on Social Security. But all the work we do for the nonprofit is donation funded, including the student program, rescuing horses. That video you saw, we do about 10 to 15 of those a year. And those aren't cheap. You got to run around and chase horses and set up panels. And, you've probably done it. But it's time consuming. It's expensive. And we do a lot of that, so we've got a lot of projects going on, and donations are what fund it. We don't pay ourselves a penny. I don't make a penny doing anything I do.
Well, I hope that
We
anybody watching this right now will actually get involved and will help. It doesn't take a lot to help. And just once you become a part of it, you realize the beauty of it, the natural beauty of it. You'll want to be more involved and maybe
well,
even, heck, one day do what William's doing or partner
yeah.
with him
Well,
somehow. I think it's
it's like
great.
that movie. It's like that movie, Jerry Maguire. Remember in the locker room, he goes, "Help me, help you."
Help me,
He
help
tells them,
you. That's right.
we're just trying to stop these fires. And save lives. We're talking about saving a lot of lives here. So
I think it's fantastic,
that's
and
what's
we got to see a shift in the hearts and minds of the American public. Period. The way we look at horses, the way we look at wildlife. just because you domesticated it. You think it's pretty and my little pony, my little pony. That's great. That's cute. That's cartoon. Okay. So there is real life. This is real life what William's talking about. So get involved. I love it. And go get him, buddy. Let's have you on again because I hate talking on the phone. Hate it. I'm one of those guys. Send me a text, give me an email, whatever. I'd rather talk in person, face to face. But the first time I talked to William, we were on the phone for at least, I think, an hour and a half. His life story is fascinating. So I got to have you on again, buddy.
All right. Thank you. I appreciate it. You take care. Happy Thanksgiving to everybody. And Charlie, happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving to you and Merry Christmas. And you can, speaking of Christmas, make somebody's day brighter by buying them this big old fit. Look at this mug. It's almost as big as my head. I have big hands. Look at it. All 4 fingers in there. Let's talk about politics and religion on Do Not Talk. Right? You'll be helping this show stay on the air too by doing that, by buying any of the products in the merch store. Or you can give directly there too. There's ways to do that. Thank you, Give, Send, Go, by the way. You're a godsend. Somebody just anonymously sent me $100 last week. And I was like, wow, thank you. You don't understand. That's extraordinary. This is costing me money to do these shows. And I'm not one of those big guys because I don't have big guests on. I have people like William Simpson on. I think it's a valuable thing. Hopefully you do too. At charliesimons.com, CharlieSimons.com. May God bless you and keep you. May God bless America. But most importantly, America, bless God.